Part 1. How the wounded child begins to choose love. There is a truth few people are ever told about love, and it is this. You are not choosing your romantic partners as an adult. Something much older inside you is doing the choosing first. In the first moments of attraction, those first seconds when your body reacts before your mind understands, what awakens is not logic, not reason, not even desire. What awakens is memory, emotional memory. The kind that was formed long before you had words for love, safety, or abandonment. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said that, until the unconscious is made conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Because what feels like fate in love is often the wounded child, reaching out again. If you have ever found yourself asking why you are drawn to the same type of partner again and again, emotionally distant, unavailable, controlling, or painfully familiar, this is not because you are broken. It is because a part of you learned very early what love was supposed to feel like, and it never stopped searching for it. The wounded child does not look for what is healthy. The wounded child looks for what it recognizes, and recognition can be mistaken for connection. When we are children, we do not analyze our caregivers. We adapt to them. We shape ourselves around their emotional limits because survival depends on attachment. If love was inconsistent, we learned to wait. If affection had to be earned, we learned to perform. If closeness came with pain, we learned to associate love with tension. None of this was a choice. It was intelligence. It was survival. But what helped you survive childhood can quietly sabotage your adult relationships. Jung understood that the psyche seeks completion. Whatever was missing, neglected, or suppressed in early life does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious. And from there, it begins to influence your desires, your fears, and most powerfully, your romantic choices. This is why attraction can feel so intense, even irrational. This is why red flags often feel invisible at first. This is why calm love can feel boring, while painful love feels alive. The wounded child is not looking for a partner. It is looking for resolution. It hopes, without knowing it, that this time will be different, that this person will finally stay, finally see, finally choose. And so the child pulls you toward what feels familiar, even when familiarity is painful. Jung called this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the original wound, not to suffer again, but to heal it. The tragedy is that without awareness, the psyche repeats the wound instead of resolving it. So many adults are not living in the present when they fall in love. They are reliving the past. The body remembers what the mind has forgotten, that tightness in your chest when someone pulls away. That urgency to prove your worth, that fear of asking for too much, that attraction to someone who cannot fully meet you. These are not random reactions. They are emotional memories speaking. The wounded child learned very early who it had to be to remain connected. Maybe it learned to be quiet, so it would not be rejected. Maybe it learned to be strong, because no one was there to protect it. Maybe it learned to take care of others, because its own needs were ignored. And in adulthood, these roles return, not as memories, but as attraction. You may feel drawn to someone who needs saving, because being needed once meant being loved. You may feel drawn to someone distant, because closeness once felt unsafe. You may feel drawn to intensity, because calm love was never modeled for you. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. Jung believed that whatever parts of the self were not welcomed in childhood were pushed into the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply what was not allowed to exist. And in relationships, the shadow often appears disguised as destiny. You think you are choosing someone else. But in truth, you are choosing a feeling. The wounded child says, "This feels like love because it feels like home," even if that home was unstable, cold, or unpredictable. The nervous system confuses familiarity with safety because safety was never consistent to begin with. And so love becomes a reenactment, different faces, same story. At first, the connection feels powerful, almost magical. There is chemistry, intensity, a sense of recognition. Jung would say that this is projection, the unconscious placing its unmet needs, hopes, and disowned parts onto another person. You are not seeing them clearly yet. You are seeing what you need them to be. And this illusion can be intoxicating, but projection cannot last forever. Reality always returns, and when it does, many relationships collapse under the weight of unmet childhood expectations that no partner could ever fulfill. This is why love can feel so devastating. It is not only the loss of the person, it is the reopening of an old wound. The child feels abandoned again, unchosen again, unseen again, and the adult wonders why it hurts so deeply, because the pain is older than the relationship. Until this is understood, the wounded child will continue choosing for you, not because it wants to suffer, but because it does not know another way to seek love. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you start to see that attraction is not always guidance, sometimes it is history, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself, you stop chasing explanations outside, and you begin to listen inward, not with judgment, but with compassion. Because the wounded child does not need to be erased, it needs to be met, and this is where real transformation begins. The collision of illusions, anima, animus, and the collapse of projection. If Part 1 explained why the wounded child chooses what is familiar, Part 2 must explain the mechanism by which this choice is executed, the potent initial magic of projection. The unconscious has a highly sophisticated technology for ensuring the wounded child's cycle of repetition continues, and Carl Jung detailed this machinery through the concepts of the anima and the animus. These are not simply gender concepts, they are the contrasexual psychic images, the feminine principle in the male psyche, anima, and the masculine principle in the female psyche, animus. They represent the soul's deepest, most unlived qualities, and crucially, they hold the key to completion or wholeness. The wounded child, having suffered a split or deficit in its early relationship with the primary caregivers, prevents this anima or animus from being properly integrated. It remains primitive, a fantasy image based on deficiency, not reality. When this happens, the psyche cannot integrate the missing qualities, the man cannot access his full emotional depth, anima, and the woman cannot fully embody her assertive, structured power, animus. And so the wounded child is sent on a relentless quest to find its missing qualities in the external world. The choice of a romantic partner, therefore, becomes a precise but unconscious act of casting. The wounded anima projects its idealized image of the perfect emotional guide, the lost mother, or the soulmate onto a woman. The wounded animus projects its image of the perfect protector, the lost father, or the assertive spirit onto a man. The person who happens to walk into the psychic field and possess even the slightest trait matching this inner fantasy is instantly illuminated by a powerful, dazzling light. This is the blinding intensity we call falling in love. It is the moment of greatest psychic potential, but also the moment of greatest illusion. When you fall in love, Jung would argue that you are not initially seeing the person standing before you. You are seeing a screen, and upon it, your unconscious has projected the image of the perfect complement, the missing half of your soul. This recognition, this sense of destiny, is nothing less than the anima or animus proclaiming, there is my completion. There is the person who will finally bring the unlived parts of myself into existence. The feeling is intoxicating precisely because it is an inner reunion mistaken for an outer connection. The chemistry is real, but it is not the chemistry between two individuals. It is the chemistry of the unconscious parts of one person finally finding an external vessel. The wounded child is convinced that the partner will now provide the absolute acceptance that the original caregiver withheld, possess the courage, warmth, or stability that the self was forced to suppress, finally resolve the chronic inner loneliness that has persisted since childhood. But the wounded child projects more than just the idealized anima, animus. It also projects the shadow. The shadow is all that the ego has repressed. The greed, the anger, the selfishness, the chaos, the neediness, all the parts that were deemed unlovable in childhood. In a strange twist of psychic necessity, the wounded child is often attracted to a partner who embodies the very shadow qualities it denies in itself. The control-obsessed individual finds themselves inexplicably drawn to the rebellious, chaotic spirit. The passive individual is attracted to the aggressive, powerful force. In doing this, the unconscious attempts a backdoor integration. Since I cannot be this quality, I will possess it through my partner. The initial magic of the relationship is a powerful psychic collision where two people are projecting their complementary fantasies onto each other. They are, in effect, falling in love with their own illusions. This phase of mutual, intoxicating projection can sustain the relationship for months or even years. Then comes the inevitable painful pivot, the collapse of projection. Reality cannot sustain the weight of a lifetime of unconscious needs. The partner is not a god, not a savior, not a blank screen. They are a human being with their own flaws, their own fears, and their own needs. The moment this humanity emerges, the projection shatters. The partner who was supposed to be the perfect attentive guide suddenly acts independently. The person who was the embodiment of strength suddenly shows fear. The goddess reveals herself to be a woman who leaves socks on the floor and gets annoyed. For the adult caught in the grip of the wounded child, this disillusionment is experienced as an ultimate betrayal. The intensity of the initial love turns into the bitterness of resentment. The magical chemistry becomes a frustrating barrier. The wounded child reacts exactly as it did in the original trauma, abandoned, disappointed, and alone. The inner voice cries out, "You changed, you promised, you lied," when in reality, the partner simply ceased to carry the psychic burden of the projector's unconscious. The resulting conflict in the relationship is, therefore, not primarily a conflict between two people, but a furious war between the conscious adult and the retreating projection. The pain is excruciating because it is not just the end of a romance. It is the brutal reopening of the initial childhood wound. The adult feels rejected, but the rejection is only a screen memory. The real rejection is the one the child experienced decades ago. This is the turning point for the Jungian path. The collapse of projection forces a choice upon the individual. Most unable to bear the internal pain will choose to blame the partner, end the relationship, and begin the endless search for a new screen onto which they can cast their wounded animus. They repeat the cycle, mistaking the next wave of projection for new love. But for the few who pause and face the agony, the shattered illusion presents a profound spiritual and psychological opportunity. It is the moment when Jung's dictum, to retrieve the gold from the shadow, becomes a painful, necessary reality. The only way forward is to recognize that what the partner was accused of withholding, or what the partner was initially idealized as possessing, is in fact a quality that must be retrieved and integrated within the self. The energy that was bound up in the outer fantasy must now be reinvested in the process of individuation. The journey of the wounded child shifts from "find a person to complete me" to "become the person I am meant to be." The alchemical crucible, retrieving projection and the ascent of the self. The relationship has shattered. The projection, that dazzling, intoxicating illusion which promised healing and wholeness, has collapsed, leaving in its wake the cold, hard rubble of reality. This is the moment where the wounded child's cycle of repetition either continues, leading to another partner and another collapse, or fundamentally breaks, ushering in the true psychological work of individuation. For Carl Jung, this crisis is not a failure. It is the crucible. It is the necessary fire designed by the psyche to force consciousness. The individual now stands at the edge of a great void. The intense energy that was locked into the external fantasy, the pursuit, the performance, the blame, the hope, suddenly has nowhere to go. It is in this profound state of pain and disorientation that the real spiritual journey begins, the retrieval of projection. The wounded child's choice, as established in Part 2, was driven by the anima or animus seeking completion through the partner. The work of retrieval demands a radical self-confrontation. What did I demand from them that I must now demand from myself? The partner was not, in fact, the perfect lover or the malicious betrayer. They were a mirror. The traits we idealized or vilified were, in fact, the unlived, undeveloped, or suppressed energies within our own psyche. If the individual idealized the partner's strength and decisiveness, the retrieval means the adult must stop seeking a rescuer and must integrate their own neglected animus, the power of assertion, structure, and direction. If the individual idealized the partner's warmth and emotional acceptance, the retrieval demands that the adult stop seeking external validation and must nurture their own anima, the power of receptivity, emotional depth, and self-compassion. The energy previously projected outwards as destiny is now consciously internalized as potential. Jung famously stated that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The collapse of projection forces the confrontation with the deepest darkness, the wounded child itself, and the shadow that the relationship was carrying. When the partner disappointed us, The wounded child felt its most ancient fear, that it is fundamentally unlovable. This deep-seated fear is the engine of the repetition compulsion. The adult's task is to interrupt this mechanism by becoming the inner parent that the child never had. This is the most compassionate and revolutionary act in the process of healing. The wounded child does not need a new partner to heal, it needs a conscious adult to hold its pain. This means listening to the need, identifying the precise, original need, safety, unconditional acceptance, visibility, protection. Meeting the need, consciously and consistently providing that need for the self. When the inner voice says, "I am unlovable because they left," the adult self responds, "That is the feeling of the wound, not the truth of my being. I am worthy, regardless of their presence." Honoring the grief, allowing the child's legitimate grief for what was missed in childhood and what was lost in the relationship, without turning that grief into blame or a search for a replacement savior. This pivotal shift, from external dependence to internal responsibility, marks the ascent from the rule of the ego to the guidance of the self. The ego is the personality, often defined by the wounds and the need for external validation. The self, in Jungian terms, is the center of the total psyche, the guiding, unifying archetype of wholeness. When the wounded child chooses a partner, the ego is in control, seeking its own fragmented completion. When the adult chooses to retrieve the projection and work on the wound, the self begins to emerge as the central authority. The ultimate breakthrough in this stage is the recognition that the intense, painful conflict that ended the relationship was not a mistake but an initiation. The relationship was successful not because it lasted forever, but because it created the necessary pressure to expose the inner wound and force the journey inward. Jung saw the relationship as a field where psychological and spiritual energies interact, an alchemical mixing where the dross, the illusion, is burned away to reveal the gold, the authentic self. When the wounded child is truly attended to, when the adult begins to lovingly and firmly provide safety and acceptance, the old patterns of attraction begin to change. The intensity of need, which was previously mistaken for passion, subsides. The nervous system, having been trained to associate love with tension and chaos, begins to calm. The individual no longer seeks the person who represents their missing part, but the person who can truly see the already whole self. This new kind of attraction is quiet, steady, and based on recognition of value, not on recognition of the wound. It is a choice made from a position of wholeness rather than deficiency. This is the beginning of the end of the wounded child's rule. The individual is moving from a life governed by fate, the unconscious repetition, to a life guided by consciousness, the self. The drama is internalized, the external world is depersonalized, and the healing journey is consciously embraced. The focus moves from "who will save me" to "what is the next step in my becoming?" The answer lies in transforming the lead of the wound into the gold of the authentic, integrated self. The new architecture of love, from repetition, compulsion to conscious partnership. The first three stages of the wounded child's journey have moved from unconscious choice, part 1, through the illusory magic and inevitable collapse of projection, part 2, to the painful but necessary retrieval of the inner self, part 3. The final stage marks the complete revolution in the individual's approach to love, the shift from repetition compulsion to conscious partnership. This is the highest potential of Jung's work applied to relationships. When the wounded child is finally integrated, not erased, but acknowledged, nurtured, and held safely by the conscious adult, the entire architecture of attraction changes. The powerful magnetic pull of the familiar chaos dissolves, and in its place, a quieter, more grounded form of attraction emerges. The individual is no longer choosing a partner to complete an unfinished story, but choosing a companion to share a finished, whole life. The dynamic shifts from a demanding, codependent fantasy to an interdependent, mature reality. The death of destiny and the birth of choice. The greatest freedom gained is the recognition that attraction is no longer mistaken for destiny. The adult has learned to filter the intense, irrational chemistry of the old wound. That initial overwhelming feeling of, "I cannot live without you," the voice of the wounded child, is recognized for what it is, the anxious echo of past trauma. The conscious adult now possesses the capacity to pause, differentiate, and choose calmness over chaos. In the absence of the frantic urgency of the wounded child, the criteria for choosing a partner radically transform, from need to value. The choice is no longer based on filling a hole, I need you to be my strength, but on sharing a life, I value your strength and respect my own. From familiarity to genuineness. The person no longer seeks the painful, recognizable pattern, but seeks a partner who is genuinely available, consistent, and emotionally mature. Qualities that once felt boring now feel like profound safety. From projection to sight, the partner is seen not as a symbol of the anima or animus, but as a separate, sovereign individual. This is the ultimate act of love, to let the other person be who they are, unburdened by the projector's fantasies. The new role of conflict. In a conscious partnership, conflict does not signal the end of the illusion. It serves as a field for individuation. When conflict inevitably arises, the mature individual no longer reverts to the wounded child's stance of blaming the other or retreating in fear of abandonment. Instead, they utilize the tension as an opportunity to look inward, internal locus of control. Why is their behavior triggering this ancient fear in me? What is my part in this dynamic? What unacknowledged shadow is being exposed? Relational alchemy. The relationship becomes a conscious container where both partners agree to use their friction not to destroy each other, but to rub off their rough edges, a commitment to mutual growth and psychological maturation. The goal is not to eliminate conflict, but to elevate it from a destructive reenactment to a creative confrontation. Jung referred to the process of becoming whole as individuation, the lifelong psychological process of integrating the conscious and unconscious, ultimately leading to the emergence of the unique self. The conscious partnership is the relational expression of this process. The partner is no longer the destination. They are the most important co-traveler on the road of self-discovery. This transformation represents a complete psychological shift. The energy previously consumed by the repetition compulsion is now available for genuine creative and life-affirming endeavors. The person is no longer a victim of their emotional past. They are the conscious author of their present and future. The legacy of the wounded child. The wounded child does not disappear. It is simply promoted from the ruler to the sacred inner passenger. It is no longer in the driver's seat, choosing the partners and dictating the fears, but is now sitting safely in the back, comforted by the knowledge that the capable, conscious adult is in charge. The wound is transformed into a source of profound compassion, not just for oneself, but for the inherent universal woundedness of all human beings. The ultimate teaching of this journey is that true, fulfilling love is not found in the perfect partner, but in the courage to become the person who no longer needs to be saved. The insights of Carl Jung offer more than just theories. They provide a map for this journey from fate to freedom. This map illuminates the hidden pathways of the unconscious, decodes the language of projection, and provides the necessary tools for retrieving your own power and transforming the wound into wisdom. To consciously move from the old patterns of repetition to the profound depths of genuine connection requires not just understanding, but a practical guide to the inner work, a process of radical self-inquiry and integration. For those ready to move beyond the cycle of the wounded child and step fully into the responsibility and profound reward of conscious partnership, the time to begin this inner alchemical process is now. Discover the structured approach to healing these primal wounds and fully embody your authentic self.